Do you feel like anyone that joins the armed forces or army, they're destined to have some form of trauma at the end of it?
No, I don't think so. It depends on units that you get assigned to and where your duty stations are. I think will kind of depend on it. What I really do feel bad about, though, are some of the females who join. And the reason I say that is because sexual assault and like rapes and things like that have always been an issue in the Army. And they continue to be an issue in the Army. And that's fucked up. And it's always been fucked up. And it's because the Army never takes them seriously. The whole thing that happened with, I think her name was Vanessa, and at Fort Hood, that's nothing new. Like, I witnessed that shit all the time in the Army. You know? Guys would do that stuff to women all the time. And the first thing that happens, a CID agent shows up, and they try to determine whether or not the female is lying. I mean, that's the very first thing that happens. Oh, you were raped? Prove it. And that's kind of how it works. Oh, you were raped, so we need to prove it. I don't think you were really raped. Could you imagine that? And not only that, like, you go to your chain of command and you try to tell your chain of command that maybe something happened. Your chain of command may or may not listen. And that's kind of one of the other things in the Army that is kind of... Not all chain of commands are like this, but you sometimes, if you try to go and report things or try to tell your chain of command something, they may or may not listen. And the Army's kind of just like, well, we don't give a fuck. And that's just kind of how people are in the Army. But overall, it depends on your job, it depends on your unit, and it depends on your leadership. I mean, there's so many different variables that are at play here.
So when you realized you were depressed, how long did it take for you to actually go seek help, or how did you seek help?
So seeking help in the Army is not something that you really do. It's not at all. It's not something that you do at all. The first time I ever went and sought any sort of help was my second deployment in Iraq, and I went to combat stress, and then after I went to combat stress, I kind of got in trouble for it. I got yelled at for going. So my boss, my E7 at the time, just making it rank simple, right? He was my platoon sergeant. I went to combat stress because, like I said, I was literally working I was only getting like 4 hours of sleep every night. And on top of that, my grandmother at the time wasn't doing well. So when you get to combat stress, it's kind of fucked up. I mean, you got to turn in your weapon. They take your weapon from you because they don't want you to shoot the place up. So you hand in your weapon, and then you go in, and then you start talking to somebody, and it was actually kind of one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten from this combat stress doctor, and I actually remember it to this day. Don't sweat the small stuff, because it was all about this little bits of small stuff that I kept like stressing, because every little thing that was going on in Iraq, it doesn't matter what it was. Like, it could just be something small. It's like amplified by like 100. Like I said, I came back and told my platoon sergeant about it, and then he got mad because I went to combat stress and was like, oh, you're supposed to be working or something. And I'm like, they don't care about mental health. And then once I became an intel guy, that's when things really get kind of even worse, because now you're dealing with national security secrets, right? And I'm using this as an example because this is how things are done in the intelligence community. What's his name? Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, when he reported the thing that happened with Trump, with the phone call, when he was on the phone call with Ukrainian president, right? So in the intelligence community, we have something that's called intelligence oversight. So if there is something that's wrong, if there is something that's illegal, and you know it's illegal, you have to report that information. It's called intelligence oversight, and that falls under Executive Order 12333. We all in the intelligence community live under EO 12333, and we all understand what intelligence oversight is. And Vindman was fucked either way. He was in a no-win situation, because if he did not report what had happened and someone else found out about it, then he could get in trouble. If he reported it, well, we all know what happened. He got in trouble. So in situations like those, what do? If you try to go to see some sort of mental health situation or mental health person, and even if it doesn't involve any sort of classified information, you're going to go and tell somebody and say, hey, I have X, Y, and Z going on. Well, now you got to find a doctor who has a top secret security clearance, because what you tell them is now classified. Because now you can't just go and tell a normal psychologist that what I am going through and what I am experiencing, because now you have a national security sensitive issue going on. So then let's pull out this national security issue, and let's just say there's something that you experienced, and say you're in Afghanistan, say you're in Iraq, and you've experienced or witnessed something. For example, when I was in Afghanistan and I find out that the person that I'm on this contracting assignment with was the guy who screened the Bagram Air Force suicide bomber in 2016 that led to a bunch of American deaths. And this guy is still on the contract, even though this warrant officer wanted him fired. But the contracting company that I worked for was like, no, we want to keep him here because even though he tells you he doesn't give a shit about his current job right now, and we know that he got moved up here because he couldn't be found to conduct these counterintelligence screenings down here at this other FOB. And we know these might lead to insider threats and deaths, and they did. Yeah, we're still gonna keep him on, and because we owe him $15,000 for a bonus. So if you're active duty, because that real shit really happened, and then oh, by the way, you find out that suicide bomber was part of a Taliban reintegration program, because you're like, oh wow, whose idea was it to reintegrate the Taliban to come on post? And then you find out that guy wore a fucking suicide vest on post to blow people up, which are, my brothers and sisters. But if you're active duty and you find this out, what do? Who do you talk to? You talk to your psychologist, you talk to your PTSD person, your therapist, and you say, hey, this is what I know. And then what? They're going to say, oh, well, is this PTSD? Is this guy just crazy? What's he going through? Is this guy being irrational? Is he giving out too much information now? Who do you share this information with? What do they do? Are they going to go and to somebody else now? Or are they going to say, hey, this guy's giving out secrets? Was that a secret I just gave out? I don't fucking know. I think it's important to know that people should know that information. That we're killing our own fucking soldiers for what reason? Because they wanted to have a Taliban fucking reintegration program? And I know that? And now I gotta live with it? What the fuck, man? So, if you as an active duty person are supposed to go and deal with this shit all the time, and I'm just using that as one specific example, but if you have some of these other issues that may be plaguing you or keeping you up at night because of shit you've witnessed in Iraq or Afghanistan, your medical records in the Army are not really yours. They're the military's. So if you say anything out of line, you say anything that's not really conducive to the military environment, they will contact your chain of command. So it's not like being in the civilian environment where you have HIPAA. We have all these privacies. We have laws. You don't have shit in the military. You don't have a fucking thing in the Army. You don't have a fucking thing in the military. You go tell a fucking doctor about anything in the Army, and they think for 1 second that you're going to do something or say something or whatever, they'll go straight to your chain of command. So your idea of privacy in the Army and what you think that you want to go and tell somebody, you don't have that shit in the Army. You don't have it in the military. So you keep all of this information. You keep it bottled up, man. You keep that shit bottled up because you know you can't tell anybody. So after a while, all this information just stays bottled up, man.
And you still recommend the Army.
Yeah, no wonder why you guys are coming out all fucked up.
Exactly. Exactly.